Minor pentatonic is hands down the most versatile scale to use in minor keys. This is because it works over the most common minor key chord progressions without us having to change the root of the scale. So when playing in a minor key, minor pentatonic is a safe bet 9 times out of 10, which is why both beginners and more advanced players use it. And of course, minor pentatonic is the bread and butter scale in blues. However, while it's convenient to be able to play the same pentatonic scale over all the chord changes in a key, this comes with a musical compromise. Let me show you why. Let's say we were in the key of A minor, so A minor is our 1 or tonic chord. Therefore, A minor pentatonic would be a good place to start. A common movement in minor keys is to the 6th chord, which in the key of A minor would be F major. We could stay quite comfortably on A minor pentatonic when the chord changes to F major, because as you can see, although the root of F is outside the scale, the 3rd, 5th and major 7th chord tones are covered by the pattern. Even if the major 7th isn't being voiced in the chord, it's still a natural chord tone that occurs in the 6th position. This gives us enough of an outline of the F major chord to keep our solo connected to the music. Practice targeting the 6 chord tones in your phrases when the chord changes. You can find backing tracks to help you practice these changes on the lesson page. Knowing where these chord tones lie also means we can arpeggiate the 6th chord within the same pentatonic pattern, using the 3, 5 and 7 from a major 7th arpeggio. Conveniently, all we're playing here is the equivalent of an A minor arpeggio from the 1 chord position. This alone tells us something quite valuable. We can play an A minor arpeggio, as well as the A minor pentatonic pattern, over F major without having to change position. Similar thing with the 3 chord in minor keys, which can be seen as the relative major key tonic. No need to change our scale, because over C major, A minor pentatonic becomes C major pentatonic, containing all the C major triad tones and natural extensions. Aside from all the theory, you can just hear that A minor pentatonic sits comfortably over these 3 chords, 1, 3 and 6. In that example, I bent up to the major 7th of the F major chord. I'll keep techniques like this to a minimum as we're focusing on scales, but you can find lessons specifically on bending and other techniques such as slides on the channel and on fretjam.com. Another common movement in minor keys is to the 7 chord. This can be seen as a whole step or 2 frets down from the tonic root. So in the key of A minor, the 7 chord would be G major. You'll most often hear the 7 chord immediately before or after the 6 chord in a minor key progression. Now, if we superimpose G major onto the A minor pentatonic scale, we can see that the root of G is in there, as is the fifth of the chord, but we're missing the third, an important harmonic tone. That alone isn't a massive deal, but there's also a non-chord tone within our pattern, the fourth, which is what the flat third of our tonic minor pentatonic becomes over the 7 chord. Listen to how this fourth tone sounds over our 7 chord G major. So we can hear that it's probably not a tone we want to emphasize in our licks. But now let's hear how things sound with the fourth moved down to the third of that G major chord. Sounds a bit sweeter and arguably more connected to the chord. What we've essentially done here is change from A minor pentatonic to G major pentatonic over the G major chord. Of course, whether or not one sounds better than the other is subjective, but all I'm trying to do is open your ears to different possibilities. You don't have to choose one or the other, you can use both approaches. But the lesson here is to not let the sheer convenience of playing the same scale pattern over more than one chord dictate your musical choices. Now, this G major pentatonic pattern we've just played over the 7 chord can also be used over the 5 chord, which would be E minor in the natural key of A minor. Over E minor, the G major pentatonic pattern becomes E minor pentatonic, because these two scales are relative and use the same notes. By playing E minor pentatonic, we have all the important tones of our 5 chord covered. So here's what we have so far. Over the 1, 3 and 6 chords, use minor pentatonic built on the 1 position as usual. Over the 5 and 7 chords, try this pentatonic pattern as an alternative. So that just leaves the 4 chord. This naturally occurs as a minor chord rooted a fourth above the tonic. Let's try playing the same A minor pentatonic scale over both A minor and the key's 4 chord, D minor. It sounds okay, and the major second interval, which is what the 5th of our tonic minor pentatonic scale becomes over the 4 chord, gives it some natural colour. But we're missing an important tone that defines this chord, the minor third. So let's try raising that second to a minor third interval over the 4 chord and listen to the result. It's perhaps no surprise that the scale we've just created with that minor third is D minor pentatonic, which covers the minor triad tones of the chord. I'm sure you can see a pattern emerging here. Over G major we changed to G major pentatonic. Over E minor pentatonic, using the same pattern. And over D minor we changed to D minor pentatonic. These are all viable alternatives to playing A minor pentatonic over all the chords. Now, all the pentatonic changes we've covered are contained within a single 7-tone scale called natural minor. So the A natural minor scale would work over all the chord changes we've looked at. However, the reason we focused on pentatonics is because this helps us to compartmentalize the natural minor scale and create phrases that connect to the individual chords. Of course, it's useful to visualize the 7-tone natural minor scale as a general roadmap for minor key solos, but also using pentatonic changes within that core scale gives us some additional phrasing ideas. A lot of the time in minor keys, the 5 chord will be major or a dominant 7th chord, because it carries more harmonic tension than the more ambiguous minor 5 chord. This can throw lead guitarists who rely heavily on minor pentatonic for their solos. Using the same method as before, that is, matching the pentatonic scale to the chord, E major pentatonic would in theory work in the same way. But E major pentatonic removes a lot of the tension that gives the 5 chord its unique character. So also try this modified pentatonic scale over the 5 chord when it's major or a dominant 7th. Now we've supported the tension of the 5 chord, thanks to the minor second that this pentatonic scale gives us. Just like the pentatonic scales from earlier were all a part of natural minor, this modified pentatonic scale over the 5 chord could be seen as derived from harmonic minor. Finally, let's look at one more common minor key movement, which can be seen as taken from the Dorian mode. It involves a major or dominant 7th chord built on the 4 position, D major or D7 in this key. Staying with the tonic position minor pentatonic scale over that 4 chord will work fine. But we could connect to this chord more melodically by using a dominant 7th based pentatonic scale as follows, which gives us the all-important major third interval. Notice how all the tones of a dominant 7th chord, 1, 3, 5 and flat 7 are in this scale, which represent the implied 7th chord in this position. These two pentatonic scales, A minor and D7, can be seen as compartmentalized from the 7-tone A Dorian. As I mentioned earlier, this lesson isn't about one approach being better than another, rather opening up your creative options so you're not simply using the same scale purely for convenience. While minor pentatonic in the tonic position remains a very usable and versatile option, as we've seen and heard, it can be a musical compromise. By experimenting with changing scales, we can connect to the chord we're playing over in different ways. For more help with the concept in this lesson, including charts, backing tracks and tabbed examples, visit the lesson page linked in the description. Also, please don't forget to like and share this video if it's helped. Cheers.